Hey friend, welcome back to Bible Tract Echoes. I'm Micah McCurry, your host. Thank you so very much for tuning in today. We gave a little bit of an introduction yesterday to this broadcast. A friend of mine is speaking for me on the broadcast. His name is Zach Carmen. And what you will hear this week over the 5 segments, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, are the different segments of a message he preached at my home church during the 40th anniversary homecoming celebration of my father-in-law's tenure as the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dwight, Illinois. That's my home church. And Zach Carmen, this young man who you will hear in just a moment, did a phenomenal job. He's preaching a message titled, "When It Rains, It Pours." And as I heard him, I thought, you know what? God's people need to hear this message. My prayer is that it's a blessing to you. He's speaking from the life of Joseph, and he's going to give some personal illustrations and anecdotes that I think will help us. It's always a blessing to me to hear when other people have lived things that correspond to things that have happened in my life. And Zach does a wonderful job with that. In the first segment yesterday, which you can go back and listen to on your favorite podcast player on demand, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, what have you. You can always listen to Bible Tract Echoes on demand. As you listen now, realize he's already said the nice things. He's already thrown the flowers. Now he's into the preaching. Now he's introduced the concept. We're talking about the trials of life that Joseph has gone through, and he's going to make some brilliant application with a wonderful illustration that will make a lot of sense here in just a moment. I'm going to ask you to lend him your ears. You folks do such a wonderful job listening when I'm speaking, and I appreciate that so much. But would you tune your ears? Let's pray for open ears, for soft hearts and sharp minds, for God to speak to us today. Listen to my friend Zach as he speaks.
Genesis chapter number 37. We'll read the first few verses, and like I said, we'll be jumping around a lot. We'll read a lot of verses here at the beginning, and so just kind of stick with me here. Let's say down in southern Indiana where I help now, and I'm the assistant pastor. Say they make fun of me a little bit because I talk fast, so you'll have to listen a little bit. Say I'll try to slow down a little bit if it's too fast, and so, but you'll have to bear with me here. All right, Genesis chapter 37 and verse 1. It says that Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. And so the first point for tonight is trials. Trials. We see that Joseph here at the very beginning, we're seeing that from the beginning his brothers hate him because his father loves him more than the others. If you will, go to verse 5 and we'll read down a little bit further. It says that Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brethren said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brethren. His father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to the earth, to the earth? And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. And so I'm sure if any of you have siblings, you'd understand that if you have a sibling that's coming to you and saying that you're going to bow down to me, it's not going to go well. I know if my brother came to me and said, you're going to bow down to me, it would not go well. All right. And so, but we see here that these are some trials that Joseph's going through. He's 17 years old. Okay, God has given him a dream, and so he tells his family, and his family hates him for it. His father rebukes him and says, essentially, are we really going to bow down to you? Do you really think that's going to happen? And as we read on, if you'll go down to verse 18 now, it says, so we see his dreams, he dreams saying he'll be over his brothers and they will bow. And then in verse 18 through 20, we'll read there real quick. It says, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. And they said one to another, behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit. And we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And so now we see his brothers conspiring to kill him. His brothers hate him to the point that they say, we're going to destroy him. These are trials of a 17-year-old. This is not a full-grown man. This is somebody who is a young person, a young man, and he has his brothers fighting against him. It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing when sometimes God tells you to do something, God calls you to do something, God tells you to do something that is right, and sometimes it requires even taking a stand against family. Sometimes it requires you taking a stand and saying, no, I'm not going to move. This is what God told me to do, and so I'm going to do it. And so we see here, as we move on to verse 27 now. Verse 27, it says, come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him. For he is our brother in our flesh, and his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen. And they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph unto Egypt. And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And so we see now he's sold into slavery. You go down to verse 36. It talks about how he is sold to Potiphar. All right, if you'll go to chapter 39 now, chapter 39 and verse 7. Like I said, we're going to do look at a lot of the scriptures at the beginning, but I'll get to the point here in just a minute. But chapter 39 and verse 7, it says, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I. Neither hath he kept anything back from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? All right, so we see here this passage talking about Potiphar's wife, okay, tempting Joseph, another trial. Okay, this is once again still a young man. This isn't somebody that has gone through a lot. This is not somebody who's seen a lot of things. This is still a young man that's been sold into slavery. And in we looked at verses 13 through 19. You can look at that and you'll see her accusing him of going into her and taking her, doing all these things. And so what ends up happening is now he's lied about from Potiphar's wife. And now, if you look at verse 20, he's imprisoned. It says, and Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. And if you will with me, go to chapter 40 and verse 23. While he's in the prison, he asked the butler to do something simple, to remember him when he goes before Pharaoh. And so Joseph has been through a lot. A young man who has been lied about. Brothers wanted to kill him, so instead of killing him, they sold him to slavery, sold to an Egyptian. The Egyptian's wife lied about him. The Egyptians threw him in prison. And now he is there, and he asked the butler to do one simple thing. When you stand before Pharaoh, remember me. And what ends up happening in chapter 40, verse 23, is he's forgotten. It said, yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. And so tonight, as I said, the title of the message is When It Rains, It Pours. And you're probably wondering, how does this apply to that? Well, oftentimes, say when we talk about when it rains, it pours, what we oftentimes think about is we think about how when there are trials in our lives, it just seems like trial after trial after trial after trial comes our way. And so in that sense, there's a couple of people in the Bible that I think about, and that would be Job and that would be Joseph. That trial after trial after trial just seems to come their way, and it seems to be never ending. It seems to be impossible to get out of. It seems that they're in a hole that will never end. But tonight, there's a little bit of a different definition that I want to show you. The origin of when it rains, it pours. Anybody know where that saying came from? Say in 1914, It was used by Morton Salt as their slogan. And the slogan was, when it rains, it pours. Because the issue back then was salt began to start caking up and it wouldn't pour out. They're having an issue with it clumping together and it wasn't usable anymore. And so what they did is they put an anti-caking agent in it, and they were the first company to do it. And so their advertising was what you see on their bags now. You have a little girl with a little raincoat, an umbrella, and what she's carrying with her is a thing of salt that is pouring out behind her, showing that even in the rain, the salt pours. And so tonight, what I want to share with you is that sometimes when the rain is coming in our lives, we get so focused on the rain that we miss God's blessings pouring out on us. We get so focused on what is going on, and really that is natural. We are a very self-absorbed people, especially as Americans. That's just the way we are. But what we'll look at now here in the life of Joseph, we'll read some more, that there was a lot of blessings that came during those trials. It wasn't just all trials. And we'll look and we'll see in a lot of the trials that it says, but God was with Joseph over and over and over again. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't just God was with Joseph. No, it required some faith on Joseph's part. It required him being faithful. It required him sticking by it when it got hard. And so tonight, as I said, I'm going to preach this message, and it can apply to a lot of different areas. It applied to my life. I preached this a few months ago in my church. And I told my pastor shortly after, or about a month ago, I told him, I said, Pastor, I'm a firm believer now that sometimes when you preach a message, it's for the preacher. I'm a firm believer that sometimes when a preacher prepares a message and God gives the preacher a message, that it's for the preacher himself.
Friend, Zach has set the stage wonderfully. He made the point brilliantly. And I can already tell you, having listened to this message in full, you will not want to miss tomorrow's broadcast. He is going to tie things together that I believe is going to be a help to you. Maybe you've gone through trials. Maybe you've dealt with some things that are harsh or hard. Well, Zach's going to talk about some things, both personally, that he's dealt with, and with things with his wife, things with his son's health that were hard, and how God has taught him some things. And it's a wonder to hear blessings of a testimony from a young man who's been through a lot, but a young man who has an attitude such as he does. It's an encouragement to me. I'll tell you what, though, honestly, it's a bit of a conviction to me. I wonder, could I have handled what this young man has gone through with as much grace, as adeptly, as wonderfully as he and his dear family have. I'm going to encourage you to tune in tomorrow right here on Bible Tract Echoes. Thank you so much for each one that has tuned in today. As we continue this message tomorrow titled When It Rains, It Pours, from a friend of mine named Zach Carmen, he'll bring us the middle installment of this message tomorrow. Have a great day for His glory, for God's glory. We'll plan on talking to you soon. God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to Bible Tract Echoes, the radio ministry of Bible Tracts Incorporated. Want to see our gospel tracts and other resources? Visit us online at BibleTractsInc.org. That's BibleTractsInc.org. Or follow us on social media to learn how you can partner with this ministry. Thanks again for listening. May the Lord richly bless you as you live for Him.